a story that I want to say, but I want Bela to set it up, because Bela was on the set of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein when he was a kid. I think you were about 9 or 10, and it's fun to hear.
Well, yes, I was 10 years old, and my father had brought me to that theater, to the set. It was the first time that I can remember ever being on the set, and it was quite an experience. We had very dark sets, ominous sets, and so they had hired a comic to bounce around and make light of everything and joke around. And, that worked with some of the people. It didn't work so well with my dad. But so that was interesting. And the other actors that were starring in the movie, other than Abbott and Costello, were always very nice to me. And I have some photographs of myself on the set. At the time, I was in military school, so I was in full military uniform when I was on that set.
There's a story which I didn't know, and I don't know if you've heard it, Bela. He had lunch with his dad, and his dad, of course, is in full Dracula regalia. And if you've ever seen the film, he looks every bit as good as he does in 1931. And Bela is looking sharp. He's about 10 years old, wearing this very wonderful-looking military school uniform. They're in the commissary. Well, apparently, the actor Robert Montgomery was also there, and he saw them sitting together. And he mentioned to the person across the table from him, he said, "Ah, I see Bela Lugosi is having a small boy for lunch."
It's a great story. Craig Reardon has created numerous great horror characters in films. Where do you see the Count as a character in this film, in the annals of film history, from your point of view, as the artist's point of view?
Well, yeah, it works. As a character, I think he's one of the fundamental characters that played an enormous, incalculably big role in launching careers that probably go off in so many directions that we'd have to put all our heads together to count them all. And I don't just mean actors, and I don't just mean makeup artists, because people fall in love with movies for numerous reasons, and are often initially drawn in by something of such charisma and magnetism, like Bela Lugosi and Dracula, that they may forget those initial catalytic moments, but some of us don't. I don't. I remember seeing our 15-inch typical television of the 1960s and late 50s, and actually Dracula was the one that got away. I remember once we were going to go on some outing, and it was in the television guide. Well, hell, if you didn't see it on, if you didn't catch it, you'd have to catch the bus again maybe 2 years later. The scheduling wasn't like it is today. We were bombarded with repeat showings of things. And I saw Dracula, and at last, I'm going to see it. And Dad said, we've had these plans for a long time, and we're going. And I wanted to, lay down and expire. But I finally did see it, and it was worth waiting for. You may find it difficult to appreciate the impact of these things, but it was more on the order of a romance. These movies embodied a sort of a mystery and a wonderful sense of dread and romance with a capital R. They weren't, as the great Boris Karloff, who's in the other film, once said, they weren't about horror in the sense that we think of horror as, violent, inhuman, callous, ugly things. They were mysterious and almost spiritual and strange and, transcendental almost. I mean, to see Bela Lugosi, this elegant, odd, in his comportment, everything about him almost, like a spider on the screen, but always beautiful and magnetic. I don't know if it's possible to characterize that, and maybe that's a good thing, because all art at some level goes past your brain, right into your nervous system, right into your heart. And that's what Lugosi and Boris Karloff were. And the amazing thing is that in Frankenstein, you don't hear Boris Karloff's beautiful voice. The two of them had two of the most beautiful speaking voices in all the movies. Stage training and the meaning and the beauty that they gave to any script, especially if they lucked out and got some good lines, was a whole separate pleasure unto itself. And, you know, Lugosi's reading of the famous line, "The children of the night, what music they make." His voice is music.
Very good. Thank you, Craig. Hey, raise your hands, Pomona, if you saw Dracula for the first time on television. Hands high for television. Look at all that. Raise your hand if you first saw it on VHS tape. A couple of people. Raise your hands if you first saw it on DVD. And lastly, raise your hands if you illegally downloaded it last night. There's one guy right there. Security, third row, second tier. Okay. Yes, it was a huge TV classic for the generation. I think Dan and I are about the same age, and for us, that was the touchstone TV movie, Dracula and Frankenstein. And Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which was referenced earlier. These were the great films in the mid-70s. Back before cable TV, I lived in New York, Danny's from Pennsylvania, and we saw this back east on a channel where it starts with a W. So I remember that quite a ways back.
Hey Scott, I
Yes.
want to address that actually. The big difference between these days and back then, and I'm sure a lot of you will remember this, is that, you know, before the advent of VCRs, the only way to see these movies was on television, was on like the universal boom of the 1960s is where I discovered it, you know, Dan, most of you guys probably, and back then, when one of these movies was on television, it was an event. It was a big deal. We didn't have the instant gratification that we have now. And I can remember, you know, rushing to get the new issue of TV Guide and starting to comb through it, looking for any movie that was listed as melodrama. Because back then, melodrama equaled monsters. And if it was on Creature Features or Chiller Theater or something like that, we loved it. And, you know, the original Universal monsters were some of the first ones I discovered, even before I discovered Famous Monsters of Filmland and so forth. But I think one of the things I just wanted to address quickly about Bela Lugosi and Dracula is that we were talking about how iconic the image is. And I can remember when I was working in Manhattan, in New York, and inside of Penn Station, there was a little shop that sold all kinds of novelties and so forth. And every day they had out on the ground in front of the store these little statues about so high of different Hollywood icons. And so there was Groucho, and there was, you know, W.C. Fields and Charlie Chaplin and Marilyn Monroe and so forth. And interesting because they were all pretty much characters who played themselves by and large. But they had a Bela Lugosi Dracula, and it cost like 20 bucks, so I couldn't afford it. And it occurred to me that, wow, you know, Bela Lugosi Dracula is the only really classic monster who isn't under makeup. When you're talking about Dracula, you're talking about Bela Lugosi's face, not Jack Pierce's makeup. Or later on, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, or whatever, you know. So, Bela is Dracula forever. And I think, you know, saying like Christopher Lee, Shore, and, you know, all these other actors who played it, I don't imagine there will ever be any Dracula that replaces Bela Lugosi. I can't picture it.
No, it can't happen.